Psalm 30, in some ways, this may be one of the most human of the Psalms. David, as I read it, I think David is kind of struggling a little bit, which is a very human thing. In fact, whether this is he feels that his physical life is in jeopardy, or whether it's just the emotional aspect of feeling that you are at death's door, I don't know. But in verse 8, he says, I cried out to you, O Lord. I begged the Lord for mercy, saying, what will you gain if I die, if I sink into the grave? Well, can my dust praise you? Can it tell of your faithfulness? It's almost as though he's saying, Lord, snap out of it. Think about what's going on here. I want to just touch on this, and then we'll move on, because we talked about that last time. But I am so grateful that when I feel crummy, and as you know, that's just a euphemism for stronger language. But when I feel so down, so negative, and I can call out to him. He wants me to, I think. I can even kind of lay my case out for him. Job did. However, as David does in this passage, neither Job nor David directly, they indirectly questioned what was going on, but neither one of them forsook their faith. They were just dealing in their own humanity, and God is okay with that. Why else would he have decided to include this poem? He didn't edit out that David felt that what was happening to him was not right. And I think sometimes had I been God, the general editor, the writer, the source, probably would have edited a few things out of the Bible that God left in. And to be honest, I'm very grateful that God left this stuff in, because it reflects what I feel and think from time to time. That's one of the great things about the book of Psalms. Is I've said this many times, but I think every human identifiable human emotion shows up in the book of Psalms. Okay. Hear me, Lord, and have mercy on me. Help me, O Lord. I said it last time. It's always a legitimate prayer. Help me, O Lord. Help me. Yeah, it doesn't seem mature. Well, you know what? David is called a man after God's own heart. He was obviously deeply and profoundly influenced and guided by God. His life had been preserved by God, physically, literally. So David was no spiritual lightweight. He was no immature believer. If he could pray, help me, O Lord, you and I can too, and not feel like, well, it's a wimpy prayer to pray. Only the weak would. Let's face it, we're weak. Okay. Hear me, Lord, and have mercy on me. Help me, O Lord. And then verse 11, which is it's as though he pins, what verses does it begin? Verse 7, the last part of verse 7, and then he pauses or walks away from the table and sometime later comes back, because in verse 11 he says, "You have turned my mourning into joyful dancing. You have taken away my clothes of mourning and clothed me with joy, that I might sing praises to you and not be silent. O Lord my God, I will give you thanks forever." We don't know what happened between verse 10 and verse 11. We don't know, we don't even know if something happened. If something did happen, we don't know how long it took. All we have is David expressing gratitude for how God has taken care of him and answered his prayer. You have turned my mourning into joyful dancing. First thing that comes to me from that is God turned his mourning into joyful dancing. David didn't do it by thinking better thoughts, being more positive, putting a smile, turning that frown upside down. David didn't turn his mourning into dancing. God did. I don't, just to be honest, I try to be honest. There have been times in my life when the mourning did turn to dancing. I'm trying to think of a time when it just flipped, and I can't. The closest I can come to that is my mom died of Alzheimer's, and the last 4 years of her life, I'm convinced for her, were a living hell. My brother Phil and I took the same flight to get from Las Vegas back to Tulsa, where my mom was in a nursing home, because the hospice people had said, "You'll want to come now," and we did. When we landed, this was a long time ago now, I mean technologically a long time ago, we landed and my phone pinged a message from my wife that said, "Your mom has passed." So somewhere between Phoenix, Arizona and Tulsa, Oklahoma, my mom died while Phil and I were in the air. I was sad of several things. One, I was sad that I lost my mom. But to be honest, I'd spent about 3 years in mourning, because every time we were able to get back there and visit her, there was less and less and less and less, obviously less of her there, to the point that the last time we visited, she looked at me and I saw it in her eye. "I know you. Who are you? Why do I think I know you?" All my siblings and I, and my dad, had been grieving her for years. But when we got to her room, the nursing home where her body laid. I kissed her on the forehead and I thought to myself, she's home. She's whole. This was a day before Easter, and I knew that after she closed her eyes and drew her last breath, when she woke up, she was in the arms of Jesus. And all her questions had been answered. All her sadness was gone, and she did have a sad life. Many pretty profound sadnesses. I was so grateful to God to know that Mom was home. And unless he could have totally restored her, I would much rather know she was home and still languishing in that nursing home. I won't say my mourning turned to joyful dancing, but that Easter Sunday service, I had a unique peace, even happiness. Well, the other times of mourning for me, although I'm grateful to say that all but maybe 2 or 3 of those times, I knew that the person who died was a follower of Jesus, had been saved, their sins had been washed away. They were in heaven now. And yet, that didn't erase the sorrow of losing them. And I'm not going to give you more of these personal gut-wrenching, what I feel are gut-wrenching stories about my losses and all that. I just say that God does not always flip a switch so that our mourning turns to joyful dancing. In my experience, it is more of a dial turn. It's like the sunrise. It is not an instant, for me, has never been an instant sensation. I know people who are today struggling with the grief of how their life is. And not all of how their life is the result of poor choices. It has just not turned out right. I don't know exactly how to say this well enough, but I think even in that, if we kind of if we're not looking for this instant change, that can be helpful. But I'm not going to say it makes everything okay. No. For some of the people I know, life is not okay. In its current status, in their current situation, this is not okay. And I'm not going to be able to give them some 3-step formula to making your crummy life okay. Well, yeah, there are things you can do that can help make it better. Your thinking, your certain behaviors, yes. But is that, again, that's not a light switch issue. David said, you turned my mourning into joyful dancing. You, God, you, Lord. To me, this suggests another prayer. Oh, Lord, please have mercy. Turn my mourning into joyful dancing. Well, that's all I got for today. I'll see you next time on SoCal with Stevie Boy.